Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We are grateful for your time in today's parallel session on resilient global industry and supply chains. The parallel session, we have invited famous experts and representatives of enterprises to have a sharing on the trend of industry and supply chain in the future, as well as China's role in the future, to have in-depth discussions. We hope to listen to your insights and valuable advices so that we can provide important contribution to the resilience of global industry and supply chains. To start with, let's welcome the moderator for today's session, Dr. Miao Li, to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Hongqiao International Economic Forum parallel session on resilient global industry and supply chains.
Welcome to the Hongqiao International Economic Forum, the session on resilient global industry and supply chains. 今年进博会和虹桥论坛真的是
And this year, the CIIE and Hongqiao International Forum will have all the distinguished guests. The parallel session on resilient global industry and supply chains is hosted by MOVCOM UN Global Compact and organized by CIIE Bureau and CCG. And we have invited many important guests. They are former Vice Minister of Commerce and Deputy Director General of WTO, Mr. Yi Xiaozhun. Former Vice Minister of Commerce, Mr. Jiang Yaoping. President of CCG, former Counselor to the State Council, Mr. Henry Wang Huiyao. Executive Vice President, China Costco Shipping Corporation Limited, Mr. Zhang Yong. Dean of Paris School of International Affairs and Sciences, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, Madam Arantxa Gonzalez, welcome. Assistant Secretary General of and CEO of UN Global Compact, Madam Sandra Ojambo, welcome. UNICEF representative of China, Madam Amakop Sanda. Group Chairman of Feng Group, Dr. Victor Feng. We also have CEO of Austrian Federal Railways, Mr. Andres Mata. Chief Commercial Officer of BHP, Madam Vandita Pound. Chief Manufacturing Officer of CATL, Dean of Global Institute of Future Technology, Shanghai Jiao Tong University, Mr. Ni Jun. Deputy CEO of Sina Mass APP China, Madam Zhajing Li. Director of McKinsey Global Institute, Senior Partner at McKinsey, Dr. Jonathan Walter. Chief Economist of Alliance of Global Talent Organization, Mr. David Blair. Senior Fellow at the CCG, former Vice President of the American Broadcasting Corporation, Mr. Harvey Zordin. Welcome. Chief of Global Operations of the UN Global Compact, Mr. Ole Lund Hansen. Welcome. Head of China Liaison Office of the UN Global Compact, Madam Liu Meng. Welcome. Chief Sustainable Officer and GM of Carbon Management Business, Innovation Group, Mr. Alex Sun. Co-Director of the China-US-EU Research Center at the China Society for World Trade Organization Studies, Mr. He Wei-Weng. Of course, we have all the guests and representatives from the CIIE Bureau and UN Global Compact, as well as experts from CCG. Welcome for your participation. To start with, let's welcome the opening remark from the President of CCG and former Counselor to the State Council, Mr. Henry Wang Huiyao, for the opening remark. Let's welcome.
Minister Zhang and Minister Rancha Gonzalez, and also our director from UN Global Compact, Mr. Hans, and also, of course, Mr. Sandy from United Nations in Beijing as well. So, and of course, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, of all the people we have here gathered here this afternoon for this great conference. 尊敬的各位嘉宾，女士们、先生们。
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my delight to meet you all in Shanghai Hongqiao Economic Forum in the very important CIIE, in the 6th CIIE Hongqiao International Economic Forum. I'm Hongqiao, the founder of CCG and the president. It is my delight to meet all of you and welcome you to participate in the parallel session on resilient global industrial and supply chains. This parallel session is hosted by MOVCOM, the UN Global Compact, as well as organized by the CIIE Bureau and the CCG. It is an important meeting. We know that value chain, supply chain, industrial chains are the most important link and hot topic in the world economy, especially in a globalized age, and we cannot avoid talking about it. Therefore, we have so many well-known experts and scholars, as well as ex-high officials participating in this meeting. I welcome you all, and I'm very delighted. And we hope that you may bring about new insights and new thoughts to our forum. Yesterday, in the opening session of the CIIE, in which I participated, President Xi sent important congratulatory letter to CIIE and Hongqiao Economic Forum. He proposed to have opener China's economy and to construct a more open economy and will promote globalization of the economy. Premier Li Qiang also mentioned that CIIE will further open to the outside world to make Shanghai as the new center of CIIE. He also proposed many concrete measures. We know that in the past 3 years, due to COVID-19 and various factors, including protectionism and geopolitical tensions, are on the rise. We have Ukraine-Russia crisis and Israeli-Hamas crisis. Therefore, we are facing fluctuations and disruptions in the global supply chains. As a result, we have the regional and fragmented development in the world. As a result, the global supply chains are severing. So how can we reinvigorate the global supply chain? It is an important topic in today's discussion. For China, CIIE provides the public goods to the world. So we hope that not only Chinese enterprises will purchase from here, but also enterprises from around the world to buy the products. Because CIIE is the world's largest expo about import, not only significant for China, but also a good opportunity for the world in terms of purchasing and promoting the stability of supply chain. Staying at the center of the supply chain, industrial chain, China's performance is still robust. For instance, we have 70% of the 5G base stations in the world. We also have 2/3 of the high-speed railway. Top 10 ports for containers in the world, 7 are located in China. In China, we also have some 12 million graduates each year. We have some 400 items of industrial categories under the UN, and we rank the top. And so that for the supply chain, and we are staying at the center place, and we are also making great performance. And we hope that the supply chain and industrial chain, China is at the center. So today we are very honored to have discussion on the following issue. For instance, in the changing international landscape and geopolitical environment, how can we maintain the stability of the world? How can we facilitate the supply chain to lower the risk and maintain stability? And also have two specific thematic discussion on this topic. To start with, about the new trend and the new impact of global industrial chain and supply chain. The second part is about resilient industrial chain and China's development. We also have the blockbuster report release event. The report is about the talent, innovation, and the resilience of industrial chain. And between the report release, we'll have the report of the UN Global Compact about implementing global development initiative to accelerate the SDGs, a white paper on electric vehicle battery carbon footprint and low carbon circular development. So we are grateful for the UN Global Compact for the participation in the report release. In today's forum, and we have the gathering of talents from academia, from the government, industries, etc. So we welcome your in-depth discussion on these topics and to pool the wisdom of everybody so that we can make contribution to more resilient supply chain. Thank you again for participating in today's forum. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the opening remarks by Mr. Wang Huiyao. Now let's welcome Mr. Yi Xiaozhun, former Vice Minister of Commerce, to deliver his opening remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Although not related to the government, the industry, or academy, however, I'm still interested in sharing my personal view on how to maintain the stability and the security of global supply chain after the Cold War ended, the booming economy and globalization, and the co-emerging global supply chain endowed the world with more than 30 years of high growth and low inflation. The WTO and the multilateral trade mechanism promoted the worldwide free trade and trade facilitation, providing fundamental support to economic globalization and the development of a global supply chain. Apart from that, the restriction of WTO and its very effective dispute resolution mechanism also provide stable and predictable trade policy environment for the global supply chain expansion. However, to many of our regrets, the economic globalization starts its declination since the financial crisis in 2008. The economic and commerce policy of major developed countries are shifting from the free trade to unilateralism and trade protectionism. Well, together with COVID-19 and Russian-Ukraine conflict and a series of geopolitical conflict further promoted the deglobalization. Major developed economies are impeding very strong administrative intervention towards the operating and well-running global supply chain and forcing the global supply chain to become shorter, more localized, and even self-sufficiency. Their policies and measures not only deviates from the multilateral trade rules set by WTO, but also not really changing the basic logic of the global market competition. And in this very fierce business competition, multinational companies will have to seek balance between or among their values, the security of a supply chain, and the lowering of production cost, as well as improving competitiveness. So they are not following the rules and the laws, and they are picking sides based on ideology. These actions and measures are not sustainable. And relying on administrative measures to break down and adjust the global supply chain may bring political benefits, but it will obviously increase the operating cost for multinational companies and will not make their industries safer and more secure. Today, the international situation forced us to think how different countries should deal with openness and security. Well, this year, our Premier Li Qiang, when visiting Germany and having discussion with the representative from Siemens, Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, he said, preventing risks and collaboration are not black or white. Not choose to cooperate are the biggest risk, and not developing is leading to the largest insecurity. And Premier Li Qiang also said that the globalization of economy is making the world economy more intertwined, and we should not exaggerate dependence. We cannot regard codependence as insecurity. We fully agree with this statement by Premier Li Qiang. I believe, at least to China, without openness, there will not be any development, and closing ourselves are posing the greatest insecurity to us. And I believe that major economies need to rationally balance the relationship between security, openness, and development. We shall prevent ourselves from falling into the trap of pan-security. Well, faced with the downturn of economy, major countries should abandon the zero-sum game and go back to the multilateral collaboration set by the WTO framework and maintain an open, stable, and resilient global supply chain. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, former Vice Minister Yi Xiaozhun. Now let's invite former Vice Minister of Commerce, Mr. Jiang Yaoping, to deliver his keynote speech. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good afternoon. I'm really happy to join today's forum on global supply chain resilience. First of all, thank you to our meeting organizer for inviting me. What I'd like to share with you is speeding up the development of digital economy and improving the resilience of global industrial chain and supply chain. Digital commerce or digital trade can be divided into two types. The first one is cross-border e-commerce. The other one is trading surveys that can be digitalized. Well, it relies on digital technology and digital services to bring disruptive innovation to all sectors and industries, and taking the global supply chain to an accelerated adjustment and optimization period, injecting new momentum to the global economic growth. Why do we call it an innovative and disruptive force? Because there are three shifts or three transformations. The first transformation is that digital trade is making the impossible into something possible. digital commerce is helping the previously not possible and too costly or non-capable traditional SME to leverage cross-border e-commerce to sell to the whole world and purchase from the whole world, adding vitality to the global supply chain, especially in recent years with the application of artificial intelligence. In China, there are already AI avatars that are helping farmers to carry out work in the field. And these AI avatars can help farmers to purchase from all over the world and sell these agricultural products to all over the world. This AI avatar can understand different languages and live stream 24/7 and leverage the power of big data to match with demands. And this is injecting great vitality to the global supply chain. And in recent 5 years, China's SME and their cross-border export grew by more than 10 times. And this is making the global supply chain more vital than ever. The second aspect is that digital trade is making those untradeable services into tradable services, and further expanding the scale and the boundary of global digital trade. And especially with the development of 5G technology, AI, and cloud computing, China is also having great strides in smart transportation, cultural tourism, education, and entertainment. There are so many new application scenarios for all those new technologies. New scenarios brings forward new business models and greatly expanding the scale of digital trade. And that is why there's huge potential for digital trade. In recent 5 years, the digitizable survey scale in China grew by 78.6%. That's much higher than the traditional sectors. That is the second transformation. The third transformation is that digital trade is transforming the traditional supply chain into the digitalized, flexible supply chain. The suppliers scattered across the world, manufacturers, consumers that are scattered in the world are connected by digital trade, serving the individualized demand of consumers. And this is leveling up the resilience and efficiency of global supply chain. And that is why in the past 5 years, China's cross-border commerce grew by almost 10 times. China has already become the country with the most complete ecosystem of cross-border e-commerce. Digital trade has become one of the restructuring element component resources and is an important power for reconstructing global industrial chain and supply chain with great prospect for future development. According to the simulation of a WTO economist, in the next 10 years, digital trade will grow by 2% every year in the next decade, and digital trade will become the new engine for driving global trade growth. And next, I'd like to share 3 recommendations to speed up digital trade. First, we should always be led by innovation. We should formulate a favorable policy environment to build a new environment for digital trade. I'll leave the details for further discussion. We shall encourage all entities in the digital trade field to develop and cultivate a new business model in digital trade. And second, we should always be open to the outside world to facilitate digital trade and to fight against protectionism and to work against unilateralism and to make our trade more open and more connected. At the same time, we should be connected to the high standard of global trade and foster a favorable business environment to allow all the countries to share the opportunities in China. And third, we shall stand by the principle of win-win cooperation. We shall join the formulation and the negotiation of standard setting in digital trade and strengthen international cooperation in digital trade and form a win-win supply chain and industrial chain system worldwide, so that development achievement can benefit people in all countries. At last, I wish today's forum a great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Jiang Yaoping, for your insightful suggestion about digital trade. Now let's welcome Executive Vice President of China COSCO Shipping Corporation Limited, Mr. Chang Yong, for the opening remark. Let's welcome. Distinguished leaders, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This year marks the decades since the initiation of BRI. President Xi Jinping, in the third Belt and Road International Cooperation Summit, pointed out that we should promote the Silk Road, ocean transportation, integration of port and trade, leading the direction for the high-quality development for China's shipping industry. My understanding is that we need to build the three-dimensional interconnected network of Belt and Road to build the new ecosystem featuring new type of port, shipping, and trade. We need to pull the global production factors to make the industrial and supply chains smoother so that we'll facilitate economic globalization featuring openness, inclusiveness, equilibrium, and win-win. Now, COSCO is anchoring the target as the world's top-class shipping technology enterprises, and we're making planning in terms of low carbon and green development and digital intelligence, and we will achieve the strategic targets, including the resilient, green, low carbon, intelligent, and inclusive shipping, so that we'll be the demonstration pioneer in terms of integrated development of port, shipping, and trade, featuring Silk Road shipping. To start with, we'll construct resilient shipping to make the world more connected. Since the 18th National CPC Congress, President Xi Jinping reiterated many times that we need to construct the controllable, effective, and safe industrial chain and supply chain. 85% of the goods are transported by the ocean shipping, so that high-quality Belt and Road, we need to have resilient shipping industry as a support, so that we need to enhance the regional coordination to build resilient the shipping industry using high-level regional coordination to ensure the anti-cyclical ability, to ensure the stable industrial and supply chain. COSCO, based on the Piraeus port in Greece, and we integrate the resources, including the ports and the railway and the shipping routes to build the express route across China and the EU, radiating to 9 countries in the Middle and Eastern Europe, covering some 71 million population, ranking as the 3rd major channel of transportation between Sino and EU trade. To build resilient shipping is dedicated to have coordination among industrial chain, to have the modern supply chain system featuring capacity, routes, nodes, channels, and finance, to have the in-depth integration of the industrial and supply chain. In recent years, and we have the fast growth, and COSCO has promoted PCTC, container ship, wood pulp carrier, and other transportation models to build a digital supply chain and to have the high-quality service from port to port, vessel to vessel, to facilitate development of automobile industry. Building resilience in shipping, and we also need to highlight multimodal transportation. COSCO is dedicated to new development paradigm, and we actively integrate into the Western Land, Sea, New Channel, and Yangtze River Delta economic belt, and to have the river-to-ocean direct linkage, and to have the strong foundation in the integration of ports, shipping, and trade. Second, we need to have green shipping to make the harmonious coexistence among enterprises and the ecology. Green development is the intrinsic requirement for high-quality development of shipping. Green shipping is not only about combination of economic benefits and environmental protection, it's more about sustainable development. According to the Professor Nancy Shukri from Harvard, if an enterprise wants to have effective development in the competitive market, it cannot ignore the environmental signal. Actually, sound environmental behavior is an engine instead of obstacles to the development of enterprises. Building the green shipping, we need to dedicate it to the green infrastructure. We need to promote wind, photovoltaic, and other renewables, and its application in ports and logistics. We need to improve the infrastructure, green transformation. We are dedicated to protecting the ocean, and shipping and ocean share the same destiny. We need to pay attention to the sound ecological development of the ocean. It is our responsibility. COSCO follows the Convention on Ballast Water and to protect the water domain so that we will have the safeguard for the blue ocean. Third, we should construct the low-carbon shipping to make low-carbon target easier to achieve. International shipping industry accounts for 3% of total GHG emission. In order to meet the carbon peak and neutrality targets of the Central Committee, as well as the zero emission target from International Maritime Organization, the COSCO accelerates the planning in clean energy, and we join hands with the world to build the first green full supply chain projects involving the methanol and in covering the R&D, transportation, production, the fueling and certification, and we accelerate low-carbon fleet design, and we self-design and construct 12 vessels with 24 standard containers, methanol dual-fuel vessel, and which will be put into operation in the Asia-EU shipping route. We will expect some 1.3 million tons of carbon abatement each year, and for the new 2 vessels of some 700 TEU, and will have the pure electric vessels, and after putting into operation will facilitate the protection of Yangtze River Delta. COSCO has constructed the renovation of some 188 electric vessels, lowering carbon emission each year by some 100,000 tons per year. In Tianjin port, we have the second container port to build the first zero-carbon port, and in Hainan Boao, Dongyu Island, and we built zero-carbon demonstration zone. Fourth, we need to construct intelligent shipping to make technology empower more values. Tech innovation is the first driving power for the digital intelligent development of shipping industry. Intelligent shipping will reshape the industrial and supply chains and to better meet the needs of consumers. COSCO has built the intelligent cold container platform to have the real-time sensing control. We have put into operation some 80,000 intelligent cold container covering 57%. The intelligent shipping will have in-depth integration among the shipping, ports, and the trade. Traditional shipping industry cannot provide information timely to the owner, to port, banks, insurance, and regulators. There is information asymmetry and distrust. COSCO has initiated GSBN platform, realizing the electric bill and delivery of containers, the bulk, cargo, crude oil, to promote in-depth integration of trade, logistics, and finance. We also need to build the inclusive shipping to make development fairer. In recent years, governments around the world highlight shipping industry and to enhance regulation. International shipping industry need to be more open and inclusive to receive new challenges and opportunities. COSCO actively participates in global shipping governance to follow the rules of international shipping to enhance regulation. No matter in China and the world, we practice ESG, so we are the good partners and good employer, members of community and sound enterprises. We have been listed in the impact list of Fortune magazine in terms of ESG, and we also have the ESG-related the loan agreement to have the initiative in the shipping industry ESG responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, in the first CIIE, President Xi Jinping said, China's economy is an ocean, it's not a pond. In the following 5 years, the COSCO is like making the wave open in the big ocean, and we are jumping to the new step. I believe that resilient, green, low-carbon, intelligent, inclusive shipping is the future. We are facing unprecedented opportunities. I believe that as long as we follow the right direction and have the joint consultation and building, we'll build high-quality Belt and Road, and we'll have the integrated development of the port, shipping, and trade. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zhang Yong from COSCO, for your excellent speech.
Mrs. Aracha Gonzalez 上台演讲。下面呢，我们隆重的有请巴黎政治大学国际事务学院院长。
Now let's welcome the Dean of Paris School of International Affairs and Science, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, Arantxa Gonzalez. Let's welcome.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation to the Hongqiao Economic Forum. Thank you for bringing us together and helping us understand how globalization is working today, as opposed to when the Hongqiao Forum was launched a few years ago. And what can we do about this? The last time I was here was in 2019, and a lot has changed. There are changes to the global economy, there are changes in international trade, and obviously there are changes in what fuels globalization and international trade, which is value chains. So let me briefly describe for you the three big changes that I see happening and a few suggestions as to how we can manage these three big changes for the better. And I will use the word S. First S, sustainability. Every nation and every business that is working to stay in business in the future, and we've just heard from a business that clearly wants to stay in the business in the future called Costco, needs to care about sustainability, needs to care about greening its value chains, needs to care about making them more economic on CO2 emissions. We know that businesses have an incredibly important role to play if we are to succeed in our fight against climate change. The practices of businesses, the production methods, the priorities of businesses will matter a lot to a future decarbonization efforts. Very often, businesses respond to public policies, governments that are putting in place policies that will help or are guiding the efforts of businesses to decarbonize, including big amounts of public financing to help the decarbonization efforts. But very often, too, is businesses themselves who set standards in the form of private standards to signal the manner in which they are going to be more sustainable. The challenge we have today, and this space of sustainability, is first the spillover effects that purely national policies are having on other countries. We are seeing this all over the place. And the second challenge we have is the multiplicity of standards that businesses need to respond to depending on which jurisdiction they are operating. That sometimes makes for a bit of a complicated business. So we have an issue of coherence and we have an issue of fairness. And this is why I think it would be very important that we generate spaces, fora, where this link between trade and climate change can be discussed, can be understood, and obviously, if possible, can be brought into some sort of coherence. The second S is the S for security. Whether it's extreme weather events, whether it is Russia's invasion of Ukraine, whether it is COVID, whether it's the geopolitical tensions, there are old and new risks that value chains need to learn to manage better. Old and new risks that obviously are disrupting value chains. This is why businesses are having to redefine their risk management approaches and include risks that maybe in the past were not that important, that today are extremely important. For example, geopolitical risks. And this is why governments more and more are looking at de-risking, meaning building frameworks to help nations manage the old and the new risks. Everybody is in the business of de-risking today. China is de-risking, China 2050, China dual circulation, EU is de-risking, new EU economic security policy, the US is de-risking. The question is not whether or not we de-risk. My sense is that we are going to de-risk because de-risking signals that businesses and governments take the issue of managing risks more seriously. The question is, how will we do it? Because how we do it will matter a lot. First, to whether or not we are managing risks or creating new ones, but also the impact that risk management will have on prices, because there will be an inflationary pressure on prices coming from de-risking strategies. And we need to know who is going to be paying this increase in prices. Inflation, in other words. So my sense is that what will matter is whether or not we can find a new balance between security and efficiency, between the economy and the security. And again, how we do it will matter. Whether we do this in a purely unilateral manner will matter. Whether we do this with some sort of understanding, including some understanding about what national security means, will matter. The third and final S, it's called services. Trade in international goods reached some sort of peak in 2008. But the part of international trade that keeps on growing is trade in services. It's no surprise, as we heard from the Vice Minister a moment ago, this has to do with technology. This has to do with digitalization. And it's less about economies of scale, and it's more about skills and connectivity. This is, by the way, the big way in which many developing countries and many smaller businesses in smaller economies are finding their way to connect with global markets through services trade. Which is why we have to be careful about how we manage technology competition and technology regulation. Because again, depending on how we do it, it will have one or a different impact on trade in services. So sustainability, security, services, these are for me the big three issues, areas that deserve a little bit of our collective attention, and how we manage these three S's will depend on how global value chains will continue not only to power a lot of the businesses that we've seen on the screen this afternoon, but whether or not international trade and its business form value chains will continue to generate growth and jobs. Thank you very much, and very much looking forward to continuing the conversation.
感谢来自冈萨雷斯女士的非常精彩、富有感染力的发言。Thanks for your insightful opinions from Mrs. Gonzalez.
Okay, so next, let's welcome Madam Zhang Bao, Assistant Secretary General and CEO of UNGC. 尊敬的各位阁下、各位商界领袖、各位领导、嘉宾，我非常高兴的欢迎各位的出席。我想感谢联合国契约组织中国联络办公室和中国商务部共同主办本次重要对话。在当今相互
Resilient supply chains are more important than ever. But over the last few years, business continuity has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and corporate supply chains are still recovering. At the same time, we have seen global crises multiply and deepen. War, economic instability, and worsening climate change are threatening people and the planet, eroding development progress at an alarming speed. At the halfway point of the 2030 Agenda, the world is not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and the future we want is quickly slipping out of our reach. Dear friends, the problems that we face are daunting, but the good news is that resilient supply chains can be a key part of the solution. When done right, global supply chains deliver significant benefits for both companies and communities, contributing to much-needed economic and social development. But when supply chains are done wrong, by not taking into consideration the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG performance of suppliers, companies then leave themselves open to significant operational and reputational risks. And impacts on people and the environment can be substantial and severe. Innovation and regional and global partnerships are key to building more sustainable and resilient supply chains. Towards these goals, the UN Global Compact China Liaison Office launched the Global Development Initiative for the Sustainable Development Goals, GDI for SDG, pilot project last year at the 5th China International Import Expo. This collaborative platform unites business leaders from food and beverage, automobile and manufacturing, finance, insurance, fashion and textile, and other important sectors to develop and incubate sustainable business solutions. Today, I'm excited to share that the GDI for SDGs pilot project will be launching a specialized report on implementing the GDI initiative to accelerate the SDGs. The report is entitled A White Paper on Electric Vehicle Battery Carbon Footprint and Low Carbon Circular Development. The report will provide case studies and technical guidance for the global EV industry, focusing on sustainable development and the full value chain. Friends and colleagues, more and more companies are realizing that when they commit to sustainable business targets, they can build a competitive advantage and better mobilize capital and position themselves on the cutting edge of global markets. Our corporate sustainability movement is rapidly gaining momentum worldwide. The UN Global Compact now has more than 18,000 active business participants in over 160 countries, and nearly 900 of these businesses are in China. As the only country with a complete industrial system, China is a key player in the effort to build more resilient global supply chains. I have been so encouraged to see the increasing engagement of the Chinese business community. Dear friends, we all know we must do more and we must do it faster. And that is why our newly launched Forward Faster initiative focuses on 5 key areas where the business community is best positioned to accelerate sustainable development. And these are gender equality, climate action, living wage, water resilience, and finance and investment. Participating companies will be asked to publicly commit to and track progress on ambitious business targets that advance all 17 SDGs. In turn, Forward Faster will provide vital opportunities for business, serving as a global platform for companies to showcase this progress and advocate for policy change. I'm pleased to say that more than 20 Chinese companies have already committed to this exciting new initiative, and we invite all businesses to join us. Together, we can build stronger companies, thriving supply chains, and a more just and resilient future in China and worldwide. Thank you, and I wish you all a fruitful forum.
Thank you very much, Madam Sanda Ojambo from UNGC. And next up, we're going to invite Madam Amakobe Sunday from UNICEF representative to China. The floor is yours.
Excellencies and the Ministry of Commerce of the People's Republic of China and other organizers of this parallel session, partners, colleagues, participants, friends, it is such a great pleasure to be here with you at this year's CIIE. UNICEF has attended this important forum from the beginning, and we are pleased to have the opportunity to speak at this parallel session to explain why a session like this is important to UNICEF, because it's not always obvious why we would engage. UNICEF works tirelessly around the world to ensure that every child survives, and thrives. And so supply chains are at the very heart of this work. It is supply chains that allow us to provide high-quality essential goods and services, whether it's delivering a measles vaccine to a child or providing a tent to a family forced to flee a war. The scale of this effort is substantial. In 2022, UNICEF procured $7.4 billion worth of goods and services to meet the needs of children in 162 countries and areas. Our main supplies base in Copenhagen is the largest humanitarian warehouse in the world. To be able to go on delivering, UNICEF supply chains need to be agile, flexible, and sustainable. But above all, they need to be resilient. What does this mean? It means that our supply chains must be ready for unexpected events, able to respond to disruptions, and capable of recovering quickly and efficiently if and when things go wrong. Now, COVID-19 showed us all what happens when supply chains are not resilient. As the pandemic swept the world, supplies of even the most basic goods and services were disrupted almost everywhere. Sadly, the end of the pandemic did not necessarily mean the end of these disruptions. Wars and conflicts and extreme weather events continue to disrupt global supply chains. As we look to the future, climate change means the risk of disruptions will only increase, as other speakers have outlined. So as we work to make supply chains even more resilient, UNICEF has focused intensely on strengthening partnerships with suppliers and transporters, vendors, and with governments to improve forecast planning and in-country logistics. For example, to deal with complexities, uncertainties, and other disruptions, we have worked with partners across the globe to develop a tool that we call Supply Chain Maturity Model. I'll repeat that, Supply Chain Maturity Model. This tool can be used by governments and organizations to measure the performance of national public supply chain functions. It is already being used in 39 countries globally. UNICEF is also working to strengthen our supply chain resilience, and we've done that by diversifying and expanding our supplier base and improving our access to inventories. In all this work, China is a key partner, needless to say. During the pandemic, Chinese suppliers responded rapidly to demands from UNICEF on behalf of countries and particularly in Africa. These were supplies for many areas of our engagement, but primarily for medical supplies and equipments. This played a vital role in helping us to meet the needs of these countries without individual access to markets. In 2022, companies based in China were the 8th largest supplier to UNICEF. We purchased goods and services worth $226 million from 147 Chinese suppliers. I should say that in 2021, and linked to the pandemic, our purchases from China equaled $1.3 billion worth of supplies. But the real value of inputs from China is higher still. Many essential inputs, from compressors for fridges to key ingredients for pharmaceuticals, originate in Chinese companies and factories as well as institutions. The absolute value that China's industries bring to our high-quality products goes well beyond what UNICEF is able to procure directly. Our continued partnership with Chinese suppliers is critical for maintaining supply chains for children. But we believe this partnership can go even deeper, especially in strengthening local production in Africa. Again, the pandemic showed that global challenges need local solutions. In times of crisis, it is vital to secure essential supplies swiftly, and that can sometimes mean procuring supplies locally. We believe China can contribute enormously to building a much larger base for high-quality goods on the African continent. China's knowledge of innovation, of industrial production, and of key materials can help bridge the sorts of gaps between supply and demand that were laid bare during the pandemic. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, ensuring that supply chains are globally resilient is in all of our interests. It can reduce risks to supplies, protect children, families, and communities, and ensure rapid responses to emergencies. Ultimately, resilience saves lives. It is that simple. It is that important. So UNICEF looks forward to working with all of you, and especially our partners in China, to strengthen the resilience of our supply chains so that all children, no matter where they are or where they live, can survive and thrive as well as meet their full potential. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished guests, for your insightful sharing. Now, the dear speakers, please come to the stage for the photo. Now we'll enter the report release session For the latest research results of CCG, the impact of talent and innovation on China's position in the global industrial chain for 38 major countries in the world, and analysis of data from talent capital, innovation resources, industrial status, and vitality of enterprises. We compare the industrial resilience. We use NEV and semiconductor as cases to analyze the impact of talent and innovation on industrial resilience. We provide recommendations and to lay a foundation for the smooth industrial chain and effective growth. Now let's welcome the person to release the Vice President and Director of Research of CCG, Dr. Zheng Jinglian. Let's welcome. Distinguished leaders, dear guests, good afternoon. I want to represent CCG and research team to issue the Impact of Talent and Innovation on China's Position in the Global Industrial Chain report. As the distinguished speakers has mentioned, maintaining the resilience of industrial chain is important safeguard for the economy. It also in line with the interests of people from around the world. Chinese government also highlights the resilience of industry and supply chain in the report to the 20th National CPC Congress, and we need to safeguard the industrial resilience and security. We want to share with you from data analysis, and we have constructed the National Industrial Chain Resilience Index to analyze the resilience status of different countries. From 38 countries, we have made the analysis. We have the G20, 19 of the G20 countries, as well as countries with more than 10 million people and per capita GDP exceeding $10,000, or some countries with less than 5 million population and some per capita GDP of $40,000. In 2022, the total GDP of these countries accounted for 62 and 88% of the world. So they are quite representative. And we have constructed the talent capital, innovative resources, industrial status, performance of manufacturing industry, and enterprise vitality, namely the 5 indicators, including the productivity and the labor force. These are second-level indicators. The data were mainly from 2020, because in 2020, due to impact of COVID, there was some disruption to supply chains. The data mainly comes from the World Bank and UNESCO. Overall, the resilience of supply chain, America, the U.S. is leading by a large stride, 1.2 times of the China, which is the second place. Germany, Japan, and Singapore, 3rd to 5th place. In the top 10, 5 countries from EU and the US, and 5 from Asia. We can see that industrial development in Asia is also quite resilient. The top 1, the US, and the last place, Chile, the difference is some 5.4 times. In terms of talent capital, America is quite advantageous. Canada, Australia, and the UK ranks the 2nd to the 4th. China ranks the 7th. Ireland and Saudi Arabia perform outstandingly because their productivity and public education expenditure account for the highest percentage in GDP around the world. In terms of innovative indicators, China and the US are leading the world. In particular, in patent authorization as well as the issue of papers, China ranked the first. In terms of overall status of industries, the US and China are advantageous. China, the 2nd place, and Germany, the 3rd place. The difference is some 2.5 times. For New Zealand and Switzerland, Holland rank relatively in the behind because they have negative points. Because for Holland and New Zealand, they have high reliance on international trade. Therefore, their industrial chain was severely impacted by the severance of industrial chain. Switzerland has an advanced economy, which is also heavily impacted by COVID-19. In terms of manufacturing, China ranks the first, Singapore the second. In terms of the added value of manufacturing, China is leading by a large margin. In terms of medium to high-end manufacturing, added value and the proportion to the total added value of manufacturing, Singapore ranks the first. In terms of enterprise vitality, America is leading 1.3 times of China. In terms of number of unicorns, the US and China, the total points or the 4 times of the total points of the remaining countries. South Africa is leading because as an emerging economy, the market is in the growth period, therefore there are a lot of startups. As for the overall performance, China ranks the second. Manufacturing performance, China is the first. Innovative resources, industrial status, and vitality of enterprises, China ranks the second. The talent capital, China ranks the seventh. Therefore, China's resilience industrial chain is sound. There are several causes. To start with, we have an immense market, the world's largest. Secondly, we have comprehensive supply chain, full supply chain advantages. At the same time, in recent years, in high-quality development, we have put in a lot of efforts. In terms of second-level indicators, for all the quantitative indicators, we rank the top or in the first half. In terms of the medium to high-end development of industries, namely qualitative indicators, we rank relatively far behind. We also analyze the impact of talent and innovation to China's industrial chain.
And from the 2010, the prediction of talent's contribution in year 2020, the contribution rate is about 21.8%. The GDP created is about $4 trillion USD, and that is even larger than Germany's GDP that year. And we can see that China is endowed with talent resources, and the talent contributed a lot to the economy. But on this slide, we can see that in the total number, we are advantages in talents. However, in terms of productivity, in terms of the rate of highly educated persons, China is still lagging behind. And in terms of innovation, the innovation index continues to rise in recent years. However, we also observed from the right that in terms of number of patents and theses, we rank number 1 in the number. However, there is still room for us to put more effort into them. And in terms of industrial upgrading, we analyzed the NEV industry. In year 2021 to 2023, the sales of market share of NEV continues to rise, and we take about 35% of a global market share. And in the recent years, investment in NEV technology also increased non-stop, and China's economy demonstrated quite good resilience. And that is because we pay great attention to talent cultivation, and we invest heavily in R&D. In year 2022, the global investment into key technology of NEV is more than 100 billion yuan, and China's investment amounts to 1/3 of that. And I believe this investment and the talent cultivation is contributing to the resilience of the economy and the industry. However, in recent years, the semiconductor industry's investment and the investment volume increased, but dropped a little bit in 2022. And in terms of export, the export of our integrated circuits continued to rise. The import dropped a little bit in 2022, and we are seeing some insufficient resilience in terms of import, and we analyzed the root causes. One of the reasons is the lack of high-end talents, which is not meeting with the current demand. And second of all, the patents are increasing in the key links. However, the investment of companies into R&D are not enough. In year 2022, 191 A-listed companies, their investment in volume cannot even catch up with one company, that is Intel. So this is bringing up some concerns for the stable development of this industry. And according to our case study, we also come up with 5 suggestions to improve industrial resilience. Well, just like mentioned by dear ministers and experts, we need to continue to be open and working with other parties. Only cooperation can help maintain and improve the global supply chain. And I think China should still be more open and promote equal and mutual beneficial cooperation so all parties can enjoy the equal opportunities in the global development. And second of all, we should construct platforms for exchanges and building up industrial chain resilience. We can exchange information and strengthen risk management and enhance mutual trust. And third, we should promote the integrated development of the innovation chain, the talent chain, the capital chain, and the industrial chain. We should build a comprehensive and free-flowing system with all these key elements. And fourth, just like Minister Jiang said earlier, we shall strengthen digital transformation to improve the predictability and adaptability of the industrial chain, so the different entities can adapt to the changes and buffer for external impacts to improve resilience and also competitiveness. And fifth, we should leverage effective macroeconomic policies to improve market environment and strengthen those weak links. We are not only going to rely on monetary policies and fiscal policies, but we should also be guided by legislation. We should have guarantee from the legal side, and we shall also optimize the environment for private business and foreign business to protect the rights of private business and business owners. And we shall create a equal environment for competition and break barriers in all links in the industrial chain. That's all for my presentation. Please feel free to download the report from our official website. You can also scan the QR code to read our report. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Zheng, for your excellent presentation, and please follow the reports and other achievement of CCG. Now we're going to have the first panel discussion. Panelists will talk about the new features of the global industrial chain and the supply chain. The panelists are David Blair, Chief Economist of AGTO, Harvey Zolding, Senior Fellow at the CCG, former VP of the ABC, Andreas Mate, CEO, Austrian Federal Railways, Madam Vandita Pont, Chief Commercial Officer, BHP, and Jonathan Wazel, Director of McKinsey Global Institute, Senior Partner at McKinsey. The host for today's first discussion is Miao Lü, co-founder and Secretary General of CCG. Let's welcome.
Afternoon. It's my great privilege to moderate this panel. We have invited 5 distinguished panelists, including the senior multinational company executives and well-known economists and great observers internationally. So today our theme 1's topic is related to the new trends shaping the global supply chains. That is a hot topic. Everybody's talking about that. From yesterday, about Premier Lee's topic, the speech moved to today, the morning. I saw so many sessions related to this. But today, this afternoon, we concentrate on the supply chain, industry chain. We know that China faced and the world faced a lot of challenges and, of course, opportunities, including the Chinese leaders' commitment to building a modern industry system. But, of course, due to the geopolitical, geoeconomic challenges, conflicts, how to explore the resilient global supply chain, how to build up find the effective strategies and measures to collaboratively build a secure, stable, green, efficient, inclusive, open, of course, mutual beneficial industry supply chain for the world with different countries. That is a topic today. Later, we are going to examine and explore what are the evolving trends of the diversification, regional cooperation, green transformation, and the accelerated digitalization of global industry supply chain as well. Of course, including what are the role of the digital economy and the new technological revolution in the global risk constructing and the transformation of the industry chain. Just now, CCG released the report related to the impact of talent and the technology innovation on China's efforts to enhance China's position in the global supply chain. So I would like ask all those questions, offer those questions to our panelists. You can answer them. The first wave, everyone take less than 5 minutes to deliver your opinions. Later we can end more, and I will pose some questions specifically to everyone. I would like to invite our lady first. Invite Mrs. Vandita Pant, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of BHP, to deliver your opinion firstly. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mao. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be here at the Hongqiao Forum and to be able to talking about a very important topic of resilience of supply chain. My company, BHP, is the world's largest miner. We produce minerals and metals which underpin the underlying economic trajectory of the world, but also enable the decarbonization efforts that we are all on. We are a global company and we work all around the world, including here in China. We have advocated for a long time for open and free global trade. It has been a powerful enabler, as we all know, of an economic trajectory of the world, to reduce poverty and to raise living standards globally. Through the products we produce, BHP has had the privilege of being a supporting company and playing our role in the economic transformation, which has been absolutely transformative of the People's Republic of China in the last few decades. Conversely, BHP also relies very heavily on our key and strategic supplier partners here in China to keep our global operations running smoothly and seamlessly. As all suppliers have experienced, it is in the times of disruption that we really get to test the supply chain resilience. And indeed, during the pandemic, that is exactly what we all went through. So what could we do differently this time? As responsible corporate players in the landscape, or as customers or suppliers? Or more importantly, what should we do differently? I would like to propose 4 considerations for you. First, one common refrain post-pandemic has been that companies and countries are getting more focused on supply chain diversification and self-sufficiency. There is talk of reshoring, nearshoring, stock building, and adding to redundancies. All this is fine in future, but in theory, but these steps do add to the cost of the value chain as well as complicate processes. Ultimately, they decrease the competitive advantage of every player in the value chain. As such, my first suggestion would be that rather than withdrawing, I like to propose to make the case for exact opposite. For example, during the pandemic, BHP worked even more closely in collaboration with our Chinese customers and Chinese suppliers to mitigate disruption of our operations across the world. We were able to do this because we had strong, deep, long-term, and direct relationship with those partners. Without this trust and cooperation, BHP and our customers would not have performed as well as we did during this very difficult time. The point I want to make here is that BHP is a trusted and reliable supplier, and we believe that deepening our collaboration with our customers on one hand and suppliers on the other is exactly what is needed to make our supply chain even more resilient. The second consideration I'd like to propose is increase in transparency in the supply chains. We need to be able to more readily identify where all the inputs are coming from and where all the outputs are going. Embedding granular transparency and traceability across the supply chain will not only help us to gain early visibility of where the supply chain may be at risk, hence allowing all of us to address any bottlenecks which may be coming in future, but will also help to assess the value chain footprint of, let's say, carbon emissions or impacts on biodiversity. These things, as you all know, are becoming critical for ensuring our supply chains are sustainable, making them resilient for future. Thirdly, by setting standards and high standards and providing necessary momentum, we can collectively ensure that the positive changes happen across the supply chain. Companies like BHP have the ability to influence the standards across the supply chain beyond our operations. We can all choose to work with suppliers who share the same approach for ESG and decarbonization standards as we do. And likewise, as a supplier, we ourselves in BHP understand the value of these standards that our customers have and work with them to tackle the challenge. Last but not least, we as suppliers or customers, building resilience has to be through committing to the same set of principles. Resilient supply chains can only exist with well-functioning open markets with price transparency. This ensures there is confidence in directing even more capital investment in bringing new production to meet higher demand. Principles of well-functioning markets with price transparency are a building block for supply chain resilience. As a supplier, BHP has been offering commodities which are critical, mined responsibly, delivered reliably, with over 130 years of experience, efficiency, and expertise behind us. Hence, trading with BHP will make your supply chain more resilient, not less. And likewise, our increasingly deep relationship with our Chinese suppliers means that our operations are more efficient and more reliable because we rely on their expertise. And more broadly, collaborative commitment to open markets and ongoing commitment towards investment means continuity of supply. So I will end where I started. Now is not the time to withdraw from global supply chains. I would argue, in times of relative stability, we have the opportunity to build in resilience by strengthening all elements of the value chain and doubling down on our commitment to open markets. A chain, of course, as we know, is only as strong as its weakest link. If we make each link more powerful, more strong, we can have the chance to maximize the power of global supply chains and make them more sustainable, effective, and resilient for the benefit of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Pent, represented the biggest miner worldwide to send a strong message. Instead of withdraw the supply chain globally, you would like to put more energy, put more your power to do a reliable, responsible player in the resilient supply chain globally. It's very, very impressive. Thank you very much. I like your proposal. Later we can discuss more. Next, we would like to invite another distinguished entrepreneur, also very well-known enterprise worldwide, is that Mr. Andrew Smart from the Austrian Federal Railways. We know that, Andrews, this year's marked 10 years anniversary of a BRI initiative. President Xi delivered a speech about BRI and announced we'll hold the Euro-China Railway Forum. And just now I told you that my hometown is the start station of the Chinese side. The Chengdu is the Euro station. And you give me feedback. I would like to hear about you. What happened? What's your opinion on the resilient global supply chain related to your company? And what's your opinion on this? Thank you.
Ja, ich glaube, globaler Handel ist in der Tat wichtig. Sorry, in German. So.
For our company, Austrian Federal Railways, we have businesses in 18 countries. And we can ensure the European-wide industrial stability. It is one important factor for us. Now, our trade is also transparent. So we can feel the importance of it. We need to pay attention to the resilience of the supply chain. It's a topic often talked about by people. For logistics, we can provide a lot of services, namely the safe, timely services. Another important part is about the cooperation with partners on equal footing. We need to have timely and friendly communication. For instance, we have a lot of negotiations, meetings, exchanges in which we can share the opinions about common issues so that we can find the solution, especially in terms of supply chain. We also mentioned that in the supply chain and logistics chain, there is one important dimension we need to have the target. It means that we have Belt and Road Initiative. We also have different destinations. So we highlight the development in all these places. The railway cooperation is important because railway crosses boundaries of countries. It will connect the world together. In such connectivity, one important aspect is administrative departments and their responsibilities. We need to have more digital development so that the logistics can be smooth.
You represent the McKinsey Global Institute. You are also a very well-known observer of globalization. Of course, the global resilient supply chain is part of your research. Please give us your suggestion and opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and pleasure to be here. See some old friends, meet some new friends. So as Mark Twain would have it, the death of globalization is greatly exaggerated. So, I mean, I think we've been going through quite a bit of stuff, but there's some fairly strong underlying fundamentals as to why we are still globalized, and we are. So on the technology side, we refer to the death of distance. Everything from containerization to the current state is just simply, it's every year it gets cheaper to ship things farther and farther. The second is the role of digital, and we call that the great unbundling, is that all these value chains are now, you can pull them apart, and you can do this over here and that over there, and so that of course sponsors trade. A third and very interesting one is called the rise of the rest, which is essentially the emergence of emerging markets, so to speak, as centers of demand and of production in their own right. And I think Asia is obviously the ground zero for all of this. Asia is almost as integrated as Europe is, and it didn't take 2 world wars to accomplish that. That was done through trade and through globalization, and importantly, the role of China as a network, not only for goods but also services, technology, and finance. So all of that is kind of how we get to this very interconnected world. And now we're faced with a real set of questions as to what next. And I think that we've been focusing our analysis right now on the question of geopolitics. And so in this increasingly geopolitically misaligned world, what does that do to globalization? So again, we start with the reality that we're all interconnected. Everybody needs something from someone. There are no islands in this global world. But there are tensions, there are flashpoints, and there are concentrated flows, which is to say there are products which are traded across borders where only 1 or 2 or 3 places where you can get those things from. And those are the concentrated flows. And those are the places where people get most worried or agitated about, is this secure? Is this stable? And then there are also, interestingly enough, flows which are cross not just great physical distances, but great geopolitical distances. If we take a look at indicators such as, voting records at the United Nations, and we start to see who is trading with who relative to their voting, about 10 to 20% of global goods are traded with people who are completely opposite ends of the geopolitical spectrum. And then finally, most of the concentrated flows are between people who are misaligned geopolitically. So this is why we're all very upset. We're concerned that there is all of this flow going on, which seems to pay no attention to how we feel politically about the other person that we are trading with. And we find that as a very, unstable kind of place. So what's been going on? Well, people say 2 things. One is reshoring. And on that, so let's bring this all stuff back home. On that one, we don't see so much, except for the United States. The U.S. is actually quite notable in sort of the physical distance of goods that has been shrinking in terms of where it's coming from physically. So actually, the distance traveled by imports to the United States is going down. China, on the other hand, is far-shoring. It's going the other way. It's getting its stuff from further and further away. So no clear message on the reshoring on the physical side. But if we look at the geopolitical side, and we look at what's been going on in terms of the friend-shoring, well, there we see a very clear trend, especially from the United States, but to some extent also from China as well. The only place that is not friend-shoring is the rest of the world. So the non-aligned countries are desperately trying to remain non-aligned, even as the United States and China is following in terms of creating more, as I said, friendly trading relationships. Now, this is not easy because at the one hand, for example, if you look at U.S. imports, what you will see is Asia is dramatically increasing its share at the expense of China. That's in terms of revenues. But if you actually look in terms of value added, it's the same. And so what we're getting is a lot of Chinese components going to Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia, and then basically getting to the US after that. So unwinding these things is quite difficult. But end of the day, this is going to create some problems for those folks who are seeking to trade with everybody else, which is, again, the emerging markets and the non-aligned of the world. So you think we basically face a question here. Either we find a way to de-risk these concentrated flows, which is the reason why this is happening. So can we say deconcentration? Or we face a prospect of deglobalization. And a deglobalized world is a very poor world.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very insightful opinions. So floor is yours, David. Then the last but not least, Harvey. First is yours, David.
I don't want to be a killjoy, but I think we're moving to a world trading system and a world supply chain system that is very different from what we knew before, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I think it could be much better than what we knew before. I think China is has some policies that could greatly improve the situation. I think the Common Prosperity Program is important. And I also think the BRI is important because it provides infrastructure, which is key to any kind of supply chains. I want to make 6 quick points. One is resilience is very different from short-term economic efficiency. Resilience implies redundancy. To have a resilient system, you need multiple supply chains, multiple producers for important inputs and final products. The financial system that was set up in the United States, which essentially negated the financial system which had been so successful that was set up by President Roosevelt in the 1930s, the New Deal financial system, we completely changed our financial system to make the banking system much less resilient, much more oriented toward short-term profits, and much more risk-taking than it had been previously. So I think the financial changes have been an important part of what's happened to the supply chain. Let's look at an example from the financial industry. For example, Bank of America, throughout the early part of the years, the 2000s, said we will never get into subprime loans. But in 2007, they bought Countrywide, which was the biggest subprime lender in the United States. Why'd they do it? It's because they were getting hit by the markets. They believed, they saw the other banks making big short-term profits, that people, the workers and the employees in Bank of America saw that they weren't getting the sorts of bonuses that were being made at other banks. And so eventually they caved in and bought a subprime lender, although they knew it was probably a bad policy in the short term. In the long term. In the 1980s and 1990s, there was a lot of talk about the Toyota production system. There were several parts of the Toyota production system, but part of it was long-term investment in employees, essentially giving lifetime employment to employees, allowing employee-led innovation. Well, the American corporations weren't going to do that, but the part that they jumped on was called just-in-time inventory, which means you outsource as much of your production as you can so you don't have to pay the workers health care and overtime and that kind of stuff. And but you rely on just-in-time delivery of inventories. That means you're highly vulnerable to every part of the supply chain that could go away. I think governments, particularly the U.S. government, is going to have to change the financial system to change the incentives to create that kind of non-resilient system. The second point is monopoly. In the U.S. economy, we've seen more and more concentration in almost every sector of the economy. That has led to increasing inequality, very high returns to a small elite, and very fast decline in real wages. The American worker has not had an increase in median real wages since 1979, and they've been declining. For the past 3 years, they've been declining sharply because wages don't match the inflation. So, and by the way, this is not just a matter of fairness for workers. You can't have a sustainable economy if you don't have people's wages and incomes going up, average people's wages and incomes going up, so they can buy things. And also, they force companies, when wages go up, they force companies to upgrade. If you don't have real wage increases, the only way you can sustain GDP growth is by some kind of financial shenanigans, by loose monetary policy, or by subprime lending, or something like that. Third point is there's a lot of political interference in supply chains. We've recently, in the United States, we've seen a lot of documents and court cases that have shown the FBI and other federal agencies have been coercing Facebook, Google, and Twitter, probably lots of other companies, to do what they want for national security reasons, supposedly, but often for domestic political reasons. How can you rely, if you're a non-U.S. person, how can you rely on that kind of system? It means there's a lot less resiliency and trust in the system. Along those lines, fourth point is, I think the U.S. dollar, which has been central to the financial system that underlies global supply chains that it used to. It's been used for highly political reasons. I mean, it's been used as a geopolitical tool. And I think that's highly dangerous because we end up without a unit of currency which people can trust. So I expect countries around the world, not only China, but lots of other countries, to move as quickly as possible away from the U.S. financial and monetary system. And that means what's going to replace it. We've got to think hard about what's going to replace it. It can't be just barter. So what are we going to do about that? A point which I made earlier, the fifth point, is real wages. I think, as I said, real wages have been stagnant or declining for more than 40 years in the United States. Now, politicians are going to try to blame China for that, but I think there have been a series of policy changes beginning somewhat in the 1980s, but really ramping up in the 1990s, which were designed to cap U.S. real wages. And that's not politically sustainable. There are going to be a lot of political fights, but I can't picture any party not having to do something about that through the next decade. And the final point, number 6, is about Chinese domestic supply chains. I think China has made a huge investment, not only in the BRI, but in domestic infrastructure over the last 20 years. And so you go to any village, anywhere in China, any town, there's a good road, there's 4G or 5G, there's connectivity. And I think now is the time for China to harvest that investment. What this opens up is the possibility of a vast network of small and medium enterprises around China. Take advantage of all that sort of dynamism that the people have in towns and villages around the country. And what the keys to taking advantage of that are part of it's healthcare and education, but a lot of it is creating and sustaining a financial system where small businesses can get a loan to do the normal business operations. So the financial system, I think, is key. Another part is SOEs, state-owned enterprises. I'm not opposed to SOEs because I think often they're better performing and more fair than large privately owned corporations. But a key as part of supply chain for small businesses, particularly as they get paid on time. I've talked to lots of small businessmen over the last year or so, and one complaint is, we got a big contract with this SOE, but they'll pay us eventually, but they don't pay us now, and we're going to go bankrupt in the meantime. So I think these changes in China could create a very strong supply chain and production system within China. So I sort of have this dream in the world where we have multiple supply chains, we have multiple producers around the world, we increase real wages, we eliminate the returns that the elites are getting from monopolies, and we create a much more resilient and much fairer system. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You deliver some great recommendations, especially later we can talk more, very interesting points. You are the senior economist, so you give us very professional recommendations. Last but not least is Harvey Zodin. By the way, we remind everyone you have the brochure, beautiful brochure inside the bank. You can see the brochure with the introduction and the resume of our distinguished panelists. So, floor is yours, Harvey.
Thanks, Mabel. It's a great pleasure to be here in Shanghai at CIIE. And it's an even greater pleasure to be a senior fellow of Center for China and Globalization, a think tank that seems to go from strength to strength every day, every week, every month, and every year. The vast changes taking place before our eyes are as disruptive as they are breathtaking. And since Mr. Mata and I have come here from Vienna, Austria, it's appropriate to mention that the great Austrian management guru, Peter Drucker, he once said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's exactly the paradigm and the paradigm shift that's happening right now. Of course, the digital economy is defined as how traditional economic activities from production, distribution, and trade are being transformed by digital technologies such as 5G, the internet, and blockchain. The digital economy enables new business models and value creation that were impossible before. The digital economy is dynamic and innovative as digital technologies enable rapid experimentation, feedback, and adaptation of products and services to meet fast-changing customer needs and preferences. And it's data-driven, and it possesses huge amounts of data that can be used to optimize decision-making and performance that would astound even Peter Drucker. Even after COVID, global supply chains are still facing many uncertainties, including trade tensions, geopolitical risks, and environmental issues. The digital economy is helping to mitigate some of these impacts. The digital economy is enhancing the quality and efficiency of the supply side. Digital economy and technologies are improving the design, the development, and delivery of products and services, as well as reducing costs, waste, and errors. Digital technologies involve advanced manufacturing techniques such as additive manufacturing, robotics, and smart factories that can produce customized and complex products with high precision and flexibility. Digital technologies also facilitate the integration and coordination of different stages and actors in the supply chain, such as suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and customers through data sharing, real-time monitoring, and cloud computing. The digital economy is improving the innovation and diversification of the supply system. Digital technologies stimulate the creation and spread of new knowledge, ideas, and solutions, as well as new business models, markets, and opportunities. Digital technologies enable open innovation platforms, crowdsourcing, and co-creation that leverage the collective intelligence and creativity of various stakeholders. Digital platforms and digital content expand the scope and reach of the supply system. The digital economy is increasing the adaptability and sustainability of the supply system as well. Digital technologies help the supply system to cope with uncertainties, shocks, and changes in the external environment, as well as to minimize negative impacts on the environment and on society. For example, digital technologies can enable predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, and blockchain that enhance the visibility, the transparency, and security of supply chain operations. Digital technologies also promote green and clean tech, such as reuse, recycling, and remanufacturing that can reduce resource consumption and environmental pollution. China, with initiatives like Made in China 2025, AI 2030, it's the country that's leading the world in technological advancement and digital innovation. China's digital economy accounted for 38.6% of its GDP in 2020, and its e-commerce sales reached $1.7 trillion, 30% of all its domestic retail sales. China now is the global leader in the number of patents and peer-reviewed Nobel Prize quality scientific papers. China has set an ambitious goal of becoming global leader in innovation by 2035, and China is well on its way. This didn't happen haphazardly, but from careful planning and from leadership from the very top in a governance model that meticulously plans and that rewards competence. Now, Huawei is a company I've studied and I know well. They're a leading global provider of information and communications technology solutions. And they're a leader in corporate social responsibility and ESG. In the West, however, most people know them for being the target of a disinformation campaign that started in the Trump years, which continues to make baseless, unproven charges of security backdoors and of being an arm of the Chinese military. If only the US and China could cooperate again as they did a decade ago when President Xi and Obama took tentative steps at building a new model of great power relations that resulted in the Paris Climate Agreement, but which President Trump killed. Let me give you one cogent example that's 1,000 kilometers straight up China's east coast from here. The Tianjin port. It's the 8th largest globally. One of the obvious places that the US economy is literally missing the boat is in shipping and port management. This could be especially seen at the height of COVID. Backward and hobbled by dated technology, US ports were unable to cope. Container ships queued for weeks to be offloaded. Shipping costs went through the roof. Hardware was outdated, and most software were relics from computing's most early days. All this was compounded by archaic union rules and exorbitant salaries for workers, many of whom were paid beyond even what a port state's governor earned. Contrast any U.S. port with Tianjin's, operating 24/7, 365. The difference is literally day and night. Tianjin Port is one of the world's most technologically advanced. Section C, the port's smart terminal, was built together with Huawei and other partners. One of the key innovative applications is Huawei's AI-based intelligent horizontal transportation system, which has achieved a series of world firsts. Large-scale commercial use of Ultra L4 driverless vehicles, the world's first 5G plus Beidou integration of ubiquitous intelligence, the world's first self-sufficiency in green electricity and zero carbon emissions. If we could only work together on the existential problems that we share in common, wouldn't that be a great world with a great future? Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Actually, everyone with your distinguished opinions and rich experience on globalization and the observation on the global supply chains. The next, the coming round, we will pose questions and you can conclude your opinion after listening to others' opinions. Firstly, I would like to ask a question to Mrs. Pant, and you are the biggest miner worldwide. Do you think the principles you just suggesting, you outlined, also work for the critical minerals? We know right now the resources anxiety among the world, the atmosphere is not so good. Can you continue to rely on the free trade and the supply chain? What's your answer? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I absolutely think we can. And I'll start with the fact that critical supply chain, critical minerals and all the commodities needed for future for decarbonization are in short supply. What that means is that there is a lot of investment yet to go to increase the supply. And one of the principles I laid out was that increase in supply happens when the supply chain gives the demand signals which are related to not just that demand will be there, but that the markets for such metals and minerals will be in well-functioning markets with price transparency, which give confidence in putting more and more investment and ensuring the security of supply. That is the start of a resilient supply chain. So that principle absolutely upholds. The second principle around high standards and traceability and transparency of supply chain, I think is absolutely a building block for commodity supply chain. And that's the reason for that is that the supply chains are very complex where commodities and critical minerals are used. And it is really important that the impact of carbon emissions, impact on biodiversity, how green and sustainably these commodities have been mined is absolutely clear to everyone, because the promise of energy transition and decarbonization is a greener world, and it cannot be starting from a dirtier world. So second principle also upholds. The third principle that I talked about, which is around collaboration, deep trust, working with each other upstream and downstream, and relying on each other's expertise, experience, and where we play best, doing that so that the whole supply chain is more competitive and the end use cost is affordable, is a principle which is really central to the critical supply chains as well. And I would argue that all these, be it closer cooperation, reliability of the supply chain, but with huge transparency, which also allows that any bottlenecks can be addressed first rather than waiting for those bottlenecks to appear, and high standards of ESG standards as well as sustainability becomes the bedrock of critical supply chain resilience, if you will. And the last point is that, as we know, for metals and minerals, they are where they are. These are not movable supply chains, and hence, embedded in that is a reliance on each other. Someone was talking about no one is an island. I think critical supply chains are the bridges, even if there were islands in the world.
Thank you, Mrs. Pent. Yes, I would like to say again, using the strong message to everybody. You know, I believe the human being right now at the causing how to improve the global supply chain due to the geopolitical, due to the geoeconomic, also the environmental issues. But it's also a moment, it's also impetus through this kind of improvement. We can have upgrade the kind of higher level supply chain for the future. Like you mentioned, the current existing supply chain is not easier to move or easier to, according to somebody's ideologic, to move that kind of way. It's how to make sure our global market as a whole will be more resilient instead of more fragmented. It's an issue, it's a challenge as well. Thank you. And I would like to invite another giant logistic to answer this question as well. Floor is yours, Andrews.
Ja, ich denke, in der Logistik ist es wie.
It's an important question. We need to build all kinds of channels. The core solution is about the Sino-EU Express, Freight Express. It is the fixed railway between the two regions, starting from China, EU as a destination. Therefore, this cooperation network in the EU can support the operation of such railway. The 14 days journey from the Middle West of China to EU, due to geopolitical requirements when passing Russia or Ukraine, and our main target is to find the new methods with our partners in China so that we can improve the resilience of such railway or anti-risk ability. Sino-EU Railway starts from Chengdu. In 2018, such action was warmly welcomed. It is an effective logistics solution. What's more, it is an environmental protection efforts. For many countries, the railway can contribute to carbon neutrality. For instance, the electricity for the train are from renewable sources. Therefore, we have zero carbon footprint. So we can use renewables for the power to lead the train. It is one major advantage for us. Just as Mr. Blair has mentioned, I want to make one comment on that. In the supply chain, the core is on the impact from countries. We have seen the impact from COVID-19 pandemic. We have the guiding policies from the nation and relevant policies for the stabilizing of the economy. It is of great importance. For the national economy, it is a major stabilizer. Even at a low level, for the trade and the services, we can maintain the continuous operation. It is important.
Including, it's quite impressive for me about the reshoring or the friendly shoring, those issues, those many the Chinese enterprises concern a lot, and of course for global enterprises as well. You can give us more additional words.
Sure, why not? But I really appreciate the opinions of all the colleagues. I think that a lot of this resonates, and I'm going to try to build on a few things that David was saying, as well as Vandita sort of laid out as well. So from where we sit, we sort of see this issue of concentration, the dependency issue, as being the thing that is really creating all this agitation. And so and how can we be dependent on these far-flung supply chains from all across the world, from these strange people who we don't speak their language, and they're, and that they have different ideas about society, and how can we depend on all those things? I think that that is it's an emotional reaction, so I have some empathy for it. But the reality is we actually don't think that there's no evidence that concentration is good or bad. There's actually no evidence that if you're more concentrated, you are more likely to be disrupted or not. Because generally speaking, there's a very good reason why something is concentrated, is that the suppliers are very good at what they do. And they were so good that there are not so many other suppliers. And that's by being good at something. One of the things you are good at is supplying your stuff to your customer. So you're good at taking care of your customer. That's why you managed to create all of this incumbency. And now that said, there is a very natural historical and evolution of these things, and that supply market shares tend to decline over time, particularly as new sources of supply emerge, particularly in those markets. Now, some things are stickier than others. Minerals is very sticky. But nonetheless, if you look at nickel, for example, it's quite impressive how China decided to figure out how to beneficiate in the Philippines very low quality nickel and create an entirely new flow. So yes, markets ultimately drive a lot of this incumbency if we allow them to happen, and if we rely on, as Vandita was saying, this sort of principles of open, transparent, well-functioning marketplaces. But why does, that's sort of like the good case. The other case of how market share tends to go away is because the incumbent fails. The incumbent does not do a good job. The incumbent ignores the marketplace. And you could look at the rise of the machinery industry in Korea, or Japan for that matter. And these are places which, well, they should have been getting investment from the incumbent. The incumbent decided not to do that. And so what happened? Well, surprise, surprise, now you have a Korean machinery industry. So that, and I will argue that if I'm coming back to something David was saying, so what happened with the United States over the last 30 years? I mean, the absence of an industrial policy is also an industrial policy. We sent it away, and we made a lot of money doing that. And a lot of it came to China, a lot of it going to a bunch of other places too. It's not the responsibility of the people who capitalized on the absence of policy, to reinvest the money in the United States. That was the problem, is that all that wealth, all of those profits, all of that valuation failed to be reinvested in the United States. And as a result, we had the consequences of that. So that's how incumbents fail. So now we have, I think that is an episode. We will see where we go. The IRA and CHIPS Act, we're seeing evidence of the desire to finally start reinvesting and crowding in private capital in the United States. Let's see where we go. It's the biggest thing the federal government has done in a very long time. But it's a competitive world. So, and that is the point, that these market functions, the world functions better in a competitive marketplaces where we're all free to make those choices on, as you said, an open, transparent, and well-functioning basis.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe, David, do you have some arguments for additional words?
Yes, of course. I take your point that sometimes incumbents fail. That's a great thing. But I disagree with the idea that most of the existence of concentration, especially I'm most familiar with the United States, is because the incumbents are very good at what they do. I think maybe they got there by being good at what they do, but they don't stay there by being good at what they do. They stay there by political manipulations and by lobbying and by the U.S. government's failure to enforce antitrust law. We have very strong antitrust laws and successive, including criminal penalties, and successive administrations have just decided not to enforce them. And I think that's led to a lot of the monopolization, oligopolization that we've seen in the U.S. economy. I'd like to see a return to very strong enforcement of antitrust laws. Sometimes there's a lot of argument that this monopoly exists because of economies of scale. I'm extremely suspicious of that argument. It's usually an argument just to protect the monopolist. We've seen, I know the case, there's an antitrust case against Google, thank God, going on right now. And I think Google was a better, in the, say, 2000, 2002, 2003, it was a better search engine. And that's the reason it defeated all the competitive search engines back then. But it doesn't stay there because it's a better search engine. It stays there because it uses anti-competitive practices to suppress any kind of competitor. And you look at that, that's happening across the U.S. economy. I'm very happy that the Chinese government is putting down monopolists. Usually it's monopoly on a small scale compared to what we're seeing in the United States. I think of the case against Alibaba. What was Alibaba doing? They were preventing people who sell stuff on Alibaba from selling on competitive platforms. There are a huge number of competitive platforms in China. I think that was a good move on their part. They should have stopped that. But you compare that to what Amazon is doing in the United States. It's much, much less. Amazon has been stealing data from its own suppliers. That's much, much worse. I also think the changes in the financial system, especially that we saw in the 1990s, we don't have time to go into the details of those changes, really, and the loose monetary policy, support concentrated big companies against small companies. And I think those are policy changes which we need to change. I think China is doing a good job of moving away from that, or it hasn't actually moved in that direction. And I can picture that if with some policy changes, we could have highly resilient supply chains around the world.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Harvey, do you have some arguments?
No, I don't have an argument with that. I take David's point about monopolies, and there should be greater enforcement. But I do believe that supply chains are a common element to all countries, and that one country or one group of countries shouldn't control supply chains, that it's an area where we need to cooperate, to work together, and we need to make the supply chains more efficient by having them be the best that they can be. And I think we need more international cooperation with respect to supply chains. And then I think we can make our global markets more efficient. But if one side or another, or one country or another, tries to control the supply chain for their own benefits, I think it's very bad. I think it's against public policy, and I think that we need to find ways to cooperate. Because if we don't, there's so many issues we need to cooperate on. Supply chain is one, global public health is another, environment is another, and so there's many others. So if we don't, and we're not cooperating enough on most of these issues, we're not going to be around for much longer.
Okay, thank you. As time is limited, we are going to end this panel. But I just would like to strengthen what we talk about, that this is the occasion for the international cooperation and international trade. It symbolizes that we would like to work together and move forward. Just now, Jonathan mentioned that many people are unhappy right now as it's confused about a lot of complicated geopolitical issues and disrupted the supply chain. We should build up the global supply chain resilient and more sustainability. We can do more on this issue, on this field. We invited the giant industry player from the miner to the railway, and of course the international observers and economists to talk about this issue. I think we would like to call for more attention on this issue, and we can work together and do more international cooperation to build up the more healthier and more resilient global supply chain. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you, our panelists.
Let's take a group photo.
And it's becoming worse and worse and worse.
I'm going to get a copy or something.
Thank you very much for your discussion. Now we are going to have the second report release, and that is the UN Global Compact GDI 4 SDG series report, implementing global development initiative to accelerate the SDGs, a white paper on electric vehicle battery carbon footprint and low carbon circular development. This release will be represented by Madam Liu Meng, Head of China Liaison Office, UN Global Compact, and Alex Sun, Chief Sustainability Officer and GM of Carbon Management Business in Vision Group. Let's welcome Madam Liu Meng.
Dear colleagues from our headquarters, New York, and countries across Asia and Oceania, and distinguished guests, our co-organizers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you so much to come to our session. Yes. And I guess probably it will be the first time many of our colleagues will listen me to speak in Chinese. So now I will begin.
Distinguished guests, today I'm really happy to join together UNGC, which might be familiar with you, in June 2022. During the UNGC Global Leader Summit, we released the China strategy. In the China strategy, we identified 7 key work areas, including targeting climate change, shorten the inequality gap, and promoting decent work, and combat against corruption, and supporting the BRI companies to accelerate their SDG goals, and also strengthen South-South cooperation. And more importantly, today we are going to release a report or a white paper that's relying on the Global Development Initiative. And we are relying on GDI for the development of SDG. A series of measures will help Chinese enterprises to realize net zero transformation and a sustainable supply chain. And I believe this will guide us and accelerate the realization of the targets in Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in order to consolidate enterprises of all countries and combat the existing and future possible challenges. Well, last year, on the exact same date, we launched the GDI for SDG pilot program. And we built the cross-sectoral innovative partnership to support the realization of SDGs. GDI for SDGs first phase pilot program focusing on mitigating the pollution of marine plastic pollution and helping with low carbon economic transformation and promote the reutilization of recycled plastic and building the recycle system and using bamboo and other materials to replace plastic.
Tomorrow in the same venue, we will join hands with our member units, CPIC and the CIIE Bureau will jointly issue the Zero Carbon CIIE Zero Plastic CIIE 2.0 plan. With the support of governments, enterprises, and multiple parties, and we will continue the in-depth promotion of the first phase project. As Madam Sambo Jando has mentioned, the first phase has covered the food, beverage, textile, automobile, communication, insurance, finance, new materials innovation, and other sectors to participate in in-depth exchanges so that we can have joint discovery on environmental, sustainable innovation and promote the accelerated development of SDG. For today's guests, and we have the experts from UN Compact, as well as the high-level representatives from New York, from the Pacific, from the Oceania. So we look forward to the exchanges with all of you to have in-depth cooperation so that we can jointly lower the marine plastic pollution to accelerate the low-carbon transformation. In this August, in the promotion of the first phase project, we also initiated GDI for SDG second phase project. We are dedicated to promote governments, think tank, and multiple parties to promote the new energy, power battery, circular development. In September, in Shenyang of Liaoning province, we had the first project meeting. We are fully aware that transportation department is the mainstay for GHG emission. The electric vehicles industry in the world has enjoyed prosperous development. It is one important solution to GHG abatement and accelerating the low-carbon transformation. Today, NEV in China, EU, and the US has taken root and started early and enjoying fast development. It will benefit more developing countries to adopt NEVs. At the same time, NEV in the emerging market will release more potential of development. It is not only in environmental protection and climate, as I have mentioned, they also cover economic and social balanced development. For instance, we can incentivize traditional industries' innovation, accelerate infrastructure construction, and provide more opportunities of employment. Many enterprises have shared with us relevant cases, low carbon and green NEVs, and we have consensus already, so they can accelerate the 2030 sustainable agenda. Therefore, in today's forum, I want to represent the UN Global Compact to issue the second phase project of GDI for SDG, the first achievement of research, namely the report implementing Global Development Initiative to accelerate the SDGs, a white paper on electric vehicle battery carbon footprint and low-carbon circular development. This report focuses on the power battery of new energy and the multi-stakeholder, the full supply chain, as well as their actions and the practices from the full life cycle for the recycling, reuse of power battery and disposal of such battery. We have made in-depth analysis. Through vivid case study of enterprises, we can provide important reference for different stakeholders so that we can accelerate the low-carbon and circular economy. We believe that more enterprises will practice the Global Development Initiative. We take actions and as well as using innovation as the leading power and will promote green and low-carbon development so that we can accelerate the achievement of SDGs. UN Global Compact is the world's largest UN institution to promote sustainable development, as well as the initiator of ESG. We are working in solidarity with enterprises around the world. We'll take the leading role and let more enterprises to join in GDI for SDG projects so that we can unswervingly promote the realization of the targets for all mankind. Thank you. Now let's welcome the knowledge partner of the white paper as well as the member unit, Chief Sustainable Officer and GM of Carbon Management Business Innovation Group, Mr. Alex Sun, to interpret the white paper for us. The main study results. Let's welcome. I'm grateful for the introduction from Ms. Liu Meng. Good afternoon. I'm from Innovation Group, Alex Sun. It is my delight to come here and join in this discussion as the knowledge partner to participate in the release of this report with the UN Global Compact about the carbon footprint and low-carbon circular development of power battery. Invision as a world-leading green tech enterprise, and we have been practicing the sustainable future for mankind. For different sectors, we have provided a lot of renewable energy technology as well as digital solutions. For instance, in carbon management, especially in zero-carbon solutions, we have been long dedicated to the high-tech research and reform, and we also participate in a lot of low-carbon and zero-carbon technology practices. Today's topic is about power battery. In the large-scale development of NEVs, we can find that the power battery, the full life cycle carbon emission, has become the major concern of governments and enterprises worldwide, because we know that for an NEV, half of the emission is from the battery. So the use or production of battery may bring about consumption of resources and energy, as well as emission of carbon dioxide. So we need to pay attention to the power battery full life cycle emission. At the same time, we can see that the global green trade barriers and limitations have caused the concern of countries around the world about the footprint of power battery. How can we do the calculation of such battery, including the full life cycle management? Therefore, we can lower the carbon footprint of the product. It is not only the responsibility of enterprises to deal with the urgent green barrier. At the same time, it is important for us to improve competitiveness and meet the needs of buyers and consumers. We can see that many countries have taken actions to do the evaluation and management of footprint of carbon into green trade consideration. This time, Invision is fortunate to join hands with the UN Global Compact as well as the Industrial Innovation Consortium of power battery in China, as well as China's Import-Export Chamber, to jointly initiate this in-depth research on power battery in China. We're also building China's own carbon footprint service platform of power battery so that we can help Chinese enterprises to solve practical issues, especially carbon barriers during export. As for the report, it is the first such report in the industry to have a systemic analysis, evaluation on global power battery, footprint, and low carbon circulation. At the same time, we use international standards. We have the same calculation methods for carbon footprint. Through the breakdown of value chain, we can compare different models of battery and zero carbon footprint, for instance, ingredients, production, transportation, recycling, the full life cycle, different stages. This report is a preliminary research and discovery. It is beneficial to stakeholders to have understanding on the carbon footprint of batteries as well as potential of carbon abatement. Another feature of the report is that it is also the first such report systemically and comprehensively compare the excellent practices in China and the world, and we compare 3 types of international standards crossing 15 years of development of batteries. We have collected more than 60 documents on carbon footprint of batteries, and we also have the major hot topics of the carbon abatement. We also have more than 20 enterprises leading cases on the power battery. We hope that through the report, we can provide a reliable and practical reference for the industry. We hope that the data and analysis in the report can help battery enterprises to better cope with the carbon barriers in the world to realize the open market and a win-win result. I'm grateful for the UN Global Compact and the MOVCOM for jointly hosting this forum. It is a strong platform for issuing the achievements of research. We also thank you for your concern and attention for this white paper. You may scan the QR code to know more about it. It is in terms of the carbon footprint and the carbon management, it is only a small step forward, and we hope that this report can leverage better and more research in battery carbon footprint so that we can contribute to the low carbon development and make major contributions. Thank you. Thank you, the two speakers, for your excellent sharing. Please pay more attention to the UN Global Compact work results, and we are grateful for your listening and participation. Now we'll enter into the session 2 of this forum. The topic is stable and resilient industry and supply chains and China's economic development. And we have the following participants to start with: Dr. Victor Feng, Group Chair of Feng Group; Mr. He Weiwen, Co-Director of China-US-EU Research Center at the China Society for the World Trade Organization Studies; Mr. Oli Lund Hansen, Chief of Global Corporate Operations, UN Global Compact. We also have Mr. Ni Jun, Chief Manufacturing Officer of CIIE; Zhai Jingli, Deputy CEO, Sign-up Mass APP China. We also have the moderator, Vice President and Senior Fellow at CCG, former Managing Director of DXC Technology Greater China, Mike Liu. Let's welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, dear host, for introducing us. We are the last panel today. Besides, we have invited senior panelists to share their insights with us. First of all, let's cut into the topic. Our topic is stable and resilient industry and supply chains and China's economic development.
To start with the guest next to me, and because we are the last panel, I would give more time to our panelists to share your opinion or what are things you want to leave with the audience. Without any ado, let me invite Ole Hansen from the UN Global Compact to talk about this topic.
Great. Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here at this forum and at the Expo, and really enjoy being here in China. Thank you so much to our co-hosts and co-organizers also for the wonderful session today. Thanks to the Ministry of Commerce, to the Expo Bureau, and to CCG. So I represent here the United Nations Global Compact. As you know, my colleague Mang was just speaking before. And we have now almost 20,000 companies that we're working with worldwide. We have colleagues, teams, and business networks in more than 70 countries. And I'm now turning in this direction, so pleased to see many of our colleagues and executive directors from our Asian business networks present here today. And what we do, of course, in the United Nations Global Compact is that we work with these many businesses all over the world to really support them, to some extent challenge them to build more sustainable, inclusive, and responsible businesses. And we've done that now for more than 20 years. And being, a very global initiative in all of these countries, this, of course, also means that we work with businesses across all parts of the global supply chain. So we've been working very closely with many of the large global industry players, and part of our work has really been supporting them, of course, in building out also their supply chain management systems. How do they really translate and cascade their own commitments on climate change, biodiversity, living wage, etc.? How do they effectively, channel those commitments and those strategies through their supply chains? At the same time, we've obviously also worked with a lot of companies, including many SMEs, who are on the receiving end of some of those standards and expectations and, really changing requests, both for higher standards and social and environmental issues, but also in terms of disclosing what that performance looked like. So this also means that we've been really first-hand witnesses to some of the disruptions we've seen in global supply chains and in economies in the last few years, partly, of course, due to COVID and due to some of the instability and tensions that we unfortunately see. So we've seen, of course, firsthand how this impacts businesses, fatal consequences to many businesses and including SMEs. But being a United Nations initiative, our perspective on this is, of course, driven by concern for sustainable development. And here we've also seen that these disruptions in supply chains and economies have had very significant negative consequences on achieving the sustainable development goals. Even before, as we all know, COVID, we were behind. We weren't on track to deliver all the SDGs, but now with what has happened in the last few years, some of that progress that we were seeing has been slowing down or has even been reversed. So this is our concern very much about supply chains. We see the impacts with an increased impact on those already living in poverty, those most marginalized people, including migrant workers, people in the informal economy, of course. So that's why we're very concerned, of course, about the topic of the day, about restoring global supply chains. That's really a condition for reigniting growth, employment, development. But as our Assistant Secretary General and CEO said before, we need to reestablish and rebuild supply chains that are sustainable, inclusive. That will make sure that those benefits of international trade and globalization actually reaches also the population groups that are left behind. And it'll also help make sure that we can accomplish that growth development does not happen at the expense of nature, oceans, climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I look at this is the right time and the right forum to reinforce those very important initiatives. Thank you so much. Next, I would like to, maybe we finish up with the all English one and then we come back to a Chinese one. I would like to, next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Victor Fong. Dr. Victor Fong is a group chairman of the Fong Group, a Hong Kong-based multinational operating across the entire supply chain for consumer goods. He is also a chairman of Asia Global Institute, a think tank researching and engaging on global issues from Asian perspective. Dr. Fong, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to just also really say how happy I am here. Henry, Mabel, like to see all the friends here. And really a great honor to be invited to this Hongqiao International Economic Forum. And I've had a long association with the UN Global Sustainable Goals. And this Global Compact, I think, is something that is very dear to me. So I think I really like the opportunity today to really say a few words. What I'd like to do is perhaps take an industry perspective. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the state of the supply chains in the world, you know, the way we see it from the ground. And then maybe to see how that might evolve and to bring in the opportunities for us to really do the SDGs, you know, in the right way as we reform those supply chains. So I think everybody knows that the supply chains have been absolutely disrupted over the last 3 years. You know, a whole series of COVID, all the unfortunate, you know, trade wars, and also, I don't think I've been in this business for over 30 years. I have not seen any period of disruption worse than the one that we've seen in the last 3 years. Obviously, everything is subject to the overall influence of, shall we say, the global geopolitical environment and how that is developing. So the first issue, I think, from an industry perspective, is that we're beginning to actually think of the global trade as dividing into essential goods and non-essential goods. I'd like to first of all introduce that distinction. Essential goods, of course, are all the things to do with defense, all the things to do with PPE, and maybe some essential food stuffs and so on. That, I think, you know, is one category that countries are really focused on, and it's very much subject to reshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, what have you. I don't know what the latest terminology is, but it's all subject to really a huge amount of, shall we say, interference from sovereign states. Now, the non-essential goods are all the common things that we need on a daily life. You know, clothing, household, you know, household items, etc., etc. The fundamental thesis I want to make is, while the essential goods are hopefully clustering into something that is more and more influenced and controlled, I'm hoping and I'm witnessing that for the non-essential goods, if anything, I think there is an increased globalization and maybe a higher level of globalization. Now, I make this point mainly because, yes, the geopolitics could overflow into non-essential goods as well. However, every advanced country is also under pressure from inflation. Once you have inflation, you need a balance. Once you control the essential goods, however defined, you know, with more and more reshoring and so on, you can be sure that that is suboptimal. And you can be sure that that will cause inflation. No, so to balance that, I think you may need to actually globalize the non-essential goods even more in order to actually make sure that you don't import a growing state of inflation. And I think that is going to be increasingly the driving force. Now, another major thing that's happening to the world is very simple. As we all know, China has been, over the last 20 years, since China joined the WTO and maybe even before then, you know, really become a main area of manufacturing where the supply chains are basically all clustered within China. Some people say that China has become the factory of the world. Now, I think in the last 5 years or so, we've already begun to look at, see a trend in the business world of what some people may call China plus one. They want to hedge their bets on some of the, moving some of the production outside of China, at least not made in China, country of origin. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. What this is evolving to, and at Li & Fung, we operate in 50 countries. And what we're really evolving to is a strategy that we're actually seeing in the market and which we're adopting of China plus N. And N could be a reasonably large number, 5 to 10 countries. So it's not only China plus one, it's China plus N. You have to diversify into more and more countries. What is really happening, if you peel away all the onions, especially in the non-essential goods, is it used to be manufactured in China, everything made in China, China country of origin, shipped to US, shipped to Europe. Basically, those are the key markets in the global trade. And if you look at those trade channels, they basically dominate all trade. Basically, those shipments of manufactured goods. Now, what is basically happening is because of the increasing geopolitical pressure, even on some of the non-essential goods, what companies have been doing is ship almost complete knockdown to Vietnam. Do the last stage of the supply chain, the labor-intensive last stage of the supply chain that confers the country of origin under the WTO rules, and you have a made-in-Vietnam product. Although the components and the upstream could be coming more and more from China. Okay, but under the rules, it's made in Vietnam, and then when that is finished, it will also then go to US and Europe. So what you're really seeing is an increasing fragmentation of the global supply chain. If Vietnam is full in capacity terms, move to Bangladesh. If Bangladesh is full, go to Indonesia. Indonesia is full, go to India. That's why the China plus N idea. And basically, if you look at the whole world now, the global supply chains are being absolutely fragmentized. There's a huge fragmentation. Instead of what I would consider called direct trade, right? Made in China, shipped to, it's now indirect trade. Now, if you look at that phenomenon, actually it's very good for the SDGs. Because as you move into those countries, what are you doing? You're going to a developing country mostly with a large labor pool. You're setting up factories. You're employing people. You will be doing exports. You'll be doing foreign exchange. And it is really the traditional way, if you look at how development economics have been going, that the world's least developed economies have been bootstrapping themselves in the early stages of their development to actually get this stage of the development and then move up the supply chain over time. In fact, if you really go back to history into the 1960s, for those of us who've been around long enough, the industrialization in Asia started out in Japan. And at that time, after the industrialization got to a certain level, it downloaded this stage of production to the four little dragons of Asia. Remember that? You know, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And then it go on. And what has happened is it benefits the developing countries moving up the scale to actually have this. And then they cascade down and down. Now, the only issue, of course, is because of the realities of how efficient manufacturing in China was for about 20 years. The whole supply chain went to China. But guess what? Because of the geopolitical situation today, that whole supply chain is slowly coming back out again. And what you're seeing is a continuation of the flying geese model, which was interrupted for 20 years. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a wholesale movement of manufacturing away from China into other countries. Not at all. In fact, what has happened is this has been Chinese national policy for a number of years now. Is really China has been trying to trade up in the supply chain into more value-added, more technologically oriented supply chain to do components, raw material, processing, etc., machinery, and all the way up to the creation of product stage and maybe even the brand building stage, up the supply chain. And the labor-intensive final stages, for over 10 years now, the national policy has been to really move that out. And not only to have a more efficient production, but also to actually benefit some of the developing countries as they receive this labor-intensive portion of the supply chain. So this is really what's happening, Chairman, in the whole world from a business perspective. And I think it really gives us a huge amount of opportunity as we construct those new fragmented supply chains to do it in a way which is consistent with the SDGs. And if you like, I can say a little bit more about that later on. Thank you.
Maybe later on, yeah. Thank you so much. I think you just beautifully summarized this well. Maybe let me invite next speaker, 贺伟文，贺老师，我在很多场。
Mr. He Weiwen, in many occasions I have heard Mr. He mention about the Sino-US trade and geopolitics. Mr. He, you can speak in English or Chinese as you wish. Let's welcome.
It's my great honor to be here. I'm grateful to CCG for inviting me to this important forum as a panelist. 下面讲中文啊，非常感谢。
I'm grateful to participate in today's forum. For time's sake, I want to briefly summarize my opinion. To start with, there are three dynamics. The first, in terms of global supply chain, the second part is the three responses. As for the three dynamics, the first one is that in the global supply chain, we are seeing the partial transfer, and which is on a continuous basis. We can see that from the China-US trade. According to the customs data, in the first 3 quarters this year, the global export dropped by some 5.7% year-on-year on US dollar terms. The developed countries dropped a lot, and for instance, to EU dropped by 10.6%, to the US 16.3%, for Japan and South Korea the drop was some 8%. For import, the drop from the EU and the US is not so large, but from the Japan and South Korea, the drop was large. From the global perspective, the figure is 7.5%, but from Japan 15%, from South Korea 23%. So it's like doubling the figure in terms of import from these countries. Since we can see larger reduction from the developed countries, we are seeing the low-end development of the trade structure. For instance, in the first 9 months, the high-tech export in China dropped by 13.7%. The import dropped by 14%, exceeding the global average by 2 times. This is from China's perspective. From the US, we can reflect this point. From the BA statistics, the first 8 months, for the North America, Mexico, Canada, the trade remained flat. To Mexico, up by 2.5%. To Canada, down by 3.8%. But to China, the trade dropped by 20.5%. Last year, there was some transformation to Southeast Asia, but this year is not so. From the Indonesia, Chinese Taipei, as well as the South Korea and Japan, and there was some negative growth in terms of the import. The positive growth from import was from EU. For instance, Germany 13% growth, and for the UK 3.9% of growth. And we can see where the import has been transferred to. For instance, advanced technology product from the US, and we can prove this point. The first 8 months, the global export to the world up by 7.1%, but to the China export down by 12.7%. Export to EU, there was no drop. Surprisingly, 30.8% higher than last year. Similar pattern from import. In the global import, there was a drop, some negative 1.9 billion US dollars. The most of reduction was from China. Import from China dropped by 25.2 billion US dollars, and from the import from the EU grew by some 12.5 billion US dollars. It is the new momentum. It is not a pattern yet. So the supply chain is transferring to the North America and across Atlantic and the Pacific Rim, especially the drop can be found in China. Another dynamics is about homeland economics, which is a hot topic, and whether it will become the new economic school and reflect some pattern, we still need to observe. Many countries are doing according to this pattern. The friendly shoring, as we have mentioned, we only have the supply chain in trustworthy countries, and that is from the West. Third dynamic is about geoeconomic fragmentation. It is the necessary result due to geopolitical camps. Now, in 2022, the global trade limitation measures exceeded 2,000, 3 times the level in 2019. We have a lot of analysis, for instance, from WTO Director General. If the global economy splits into 2 camps, then the global GDP may be dropped by 5%. The economic volume of the whole Japan. That is a terrible result. So we need to see the trend. About supply chain resilience, we need to find where the issues are, and we need to take measures accordingly. And we have like 3 responses to start with, and we have the global approach for global issues, and we need to uphold multilateral system. For the multilateral system, we need to start with to uphold geopolitical cooperation. If we have tensions instead of cooperation, we cannot do the right thing. In terms of trade, we need to uphold the WTO multilateral trade rules. We also need to be more flexible, more diversified, to add in bilateral and multilateral agendas. For instance, in Britain, there was an AI Security Summit. It is a good example. We have the participation from China, the US, and EU. So it is about multilateral discussion. From China's perspective, the only way out is opening up to the whole world. In terms of politics, we need to stabilize the relationship with the West. In terms of economy, we need to open up without hesitation. There are some misunderstandings, some narrow nationalism. We need to overcome such mentality. We also need to do practical things, and there are many different channels. To start with, enhancing regional cooperation. It is a local track. We also need to enhance industrial cooperation. For instance, the Semiconductor Association of China and the US has regular discussion channels. It is a good thing, and we also need to have the track of enterprises. It is the basic building block. We also need to encourage enterprises to invest in China, and Chinese enterprises going out. It is the two-way pathway. If we invest in Vietnam and Mexico, then Mexico to the US, to EU, but from the China's local land, the export is lower. Is it an issue? From the national perspective, the volume seems to be lower, but from enterprise perspective, it is higher. The global supply chain, including Vietnam, remains the integrity. We need to move toward this direction. Thank you, Mr. He, for your speech, and in several minutes, you share with us a lot of information. I want to start with to invite Ms. Zhai Jingli to share with us. You have been in the paper industry for more than 30 years. You have heard the opinions from the speakers in terms of regenerative supply chain. What is your opinion? Thank you, moderator. In terms of building the stable and resilient industry and supply chains, I want to start with share 2 aspects. The first part is how China can play its role. Many speakers have mentioned due to international landscape, especially unilateralism, geopolitics tensions and conflicts, including the reshuffling of supply chain. The global supply chain is facing challenges. International community need to work in solidarity to enhance the global supply chain and resilience in the industrial chain. For a long time, as the core of the world's industrial chain, especially after COVID-19, enterprises can see that national level there are a series of policies that is pro-economy, pro-consumption. We also see that the confidence level is recovering when participating in the constructing and maintenance of global resilience in supply chain. China has always played an important role. I want to share with you through 3 aspects. To start with, China has comprehensive and mature industrial structure. Therefore, there is a scale of economy. China is the world's only country possessing all the industrial categories under the UN system and with the most comprehensive industrial categories and the most comprehensive industrial chains. Such a coverage involves wide industrial structure, providing the foundation for multinational in the world, as well as provide the security to supply chain. What's more, in Yangtze River Delta, Pearl River Delta, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, we have important clusters of manufacturing industry. As a result, made in China has great advantages in cost and imports, and also in talents. So we can see that China's industry and supply chains are on the rise. And we're also making for the shortfalls. We need governments and a market to work with each other so that we can enhance the coordinative effect in the supply chain to have the joint innovation. This is the first aspect. The second one is about strategic thinking. We need to actively promote digital technology and its integration with the global supply chain. For us, one of the challenges in global supply chain is the shortage in labor and the higher cost of labor. By promoting digital technology and integration with the service manufacturing industries, especially application of AI, will be a necessary solution to the shortage of labor. To maintain and improve the global chains, it is the necessity. The digital technology can lower the transaction cost and the management cost of enterprises. At the same time, it will lower the cost of ICT application. So in global supply chain, industrial chain transformation and upgrading, we can play our advantage, for instance, the immense data and scenarios, so that we can improve the digital connection in the supply chain. We can have autonomous, controllable, effective, and safe digital supply chain to break the limitation of the space and time to even extend the supply chain. Therefore, we can improve the resilience of supply chain. For multinationals, we can provide larger room of development in China. The third part is about improving global supply chain, industrial chain stability. We need to consolidate the global value chain cooperation. It is one important highlight of China to improve the high level opening up to the world. In the globalized world, domestic and international circulations are intertwined and enhanced. For instance, using domestic circulation as a mainstay, we also play the role of market function of overseas market so that we can integrate the resource factors in China and to have good integration and replenishment so that we can make good use of the two markets to have the resilient supply chain.
And then the BRI initiative is a very nice example, and we can leverage the geological advantage of Belt and Road initiative and work with the countries along BRI on production capacity, cooperation, and also the integration of industries. We can leverage the region as a lever to connect with the global supply chain to promote cooperation and also increase resilience, and that is how we can build a much better global supply chain. Thank you very much, Ms. Zhai Jingli, for offering your insight from the perspective of strategy. Now I'd like to invite Professor Ni Jun Professor Ni Jun actually work across academia and also the business area. Well, in your past experience, what matters very much is that you have been awarded as the most influential professor in smart manufacturing. So, as the Chief Manufacturing Officer of CIIE and also the Dean of Global Institute of Future Technology at Shanghai Jiao Tong University, could you please share with us how you enterprises should play their role in building the global value chain? Well, thank you very much. I'd like to share some of my personal opinions. Well, at CIIE, we are a company in helping with the energy transformation, and we are a company dedicated to save our planet by replacing traditional fossil fuels with new types of energy sources. Well, in our industry, it's already a global industry, so from the perspective of our clients, we cover almost all the OEMs in vehicle sector, and we work with a lot of energy storage system in the Americas and Asia. They're also using CATL's batteries. Our manufacturing bases are also located worldwide in 15 locations. It's not reasonable and economically feasible to manufacture at one place and then distribute them into other places. And also, because of the geopolitical tension and conflicts, a lot of countries and regions are setting barriers by legislation. So they are actually setting barriers and force us to set up a stable and resilient supply chain, which is critical for us, because for our manufacturing, if we look through the upstream to the downstream, we cover a lot of industries and sectors, start from mining, the obtaining of the original stones and minerals, the extractions, and then manufacture them into batteries and transport the battery to the OEMs, and then we continue to serve these OEMs with our software so the battery can offer valuable service in their lifetime. And even when the batteries reach the end of life, we still recycle them. The NEV and dual carbon transformation will require a large amount of minerals. However, the reserve on our planet is limited. So CATL from very early on become the largest enterprise recycling lithium battery. We call it urban mining. In fact, for example, for the a lot of the lithium mines are not generating high-quality lithium minerals. For example, in China, the lithium content is only about 0.2 to 0.3%. But for even Chile, this country with natural endowment, their lithium content is only like 2 to 3%. In order to get 1 ton of lithium carbonate, you need 100 tons of lithium mineral. But actually, if we took the direction of urban mining, then the lithium content is much higher in what we recycled. And we cannot move the mines randomly to Europe, to the Americas, etc. So for a lot of countries, they have their own committed carbon reduction targets. So you need to use lots of EV battery and energy storage batteries. And us at CATL, we can sell our products to these countries. The IRA in the US and the EU's Battery Act are all barriers that stop us from selling products to these territories. At CIIE, we have our factory. We're also setting up our plant in Hungary. We are also working with all type of clients in Asia and Americas. We want to build a global supply chain at CIIE. Technology innovation is a very effective way to increase our market share. We have three types of innovation. First of all, the advanced technology, and then excellent operation and service beyond customer expectation. We innovate in all three fronts. I will give you one example. The phosphate ferrolithium is much higher in content. We don't need a large amount of precious metal. At CITL, we newly launched the Shenxing 4C. And for the phosphate ferrolithium, and this 4C, Shenxing 4C can support hundreds of kilometers of driving. And we can reduce our reliance on those very precious natural resources. And the other example is that even given the limited resource of lithium, whether we can use other batteries, for example, sodium battery, the sodium contents is much more than lithium. So this is another way of innovating and building our resilience at supply chain. That's all for me. Thank you very much, Professor Ni Jun. Actually, from what you said just now, China is making great breakthrough in terms of energy restoration. You spend just a few minutes to deliver a very clear logic and demonstrated their innovation at CITL. Well, because we are the last panel discussion, I'd like to invite all 5 guests to use one sentence to summarize your prospect of the future.
Discussing, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists to give a 10 seconds summary and how you see the future as we go here. Alan.
That's a big challenge in just 10 seconds, but a couple of perspectives. I was very inspired by the professor who just spoke, and I think that was maybe one perspective I would like to amplify here at the end, is that we are facing, an imminent climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis. We're all looking, of course, for international political collaboration. We're looking forward to the COP28. But equally important, and maybe a perspective that we could emphasize even more today as we're talking about resilient supply chains, is that we need, large-scale technological innovations and solutions to address those challenges. And that only happens if we have global, effective supply chains where we can tap into skills and resources elsewhere, where we can have the necessary international collaboration, but also competition and innovation. So that's maybe the one perspective I have time to highlight. But in summary, yes, I do like to talk about the shift also, as you said, as an opportunity. Let us not just rebuild and strengthen supply chains, but make sure that the next version of global supply chains have responsibility and sustainability at the heart. In the long term, that's also what builds competitiveness for individual companies and economies, and what builds resilience in the system. Thank you.
Wonderful. Victor?
Oh, no, thank you. Well, I'll do it as quickly as I can. I think when we start talking about the future supply chains, especially resilient supply chains, we're really impacting all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. I think, while I'm concerned about climate change, everybody's very concerned about climate change, I think we need to be aware of some of the other SDGs as well. I think this movement, especially in the changing manufacturing that Zhao Zhong just mentioned, I think the decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, industry, innovation, infrastructure, SDG 9, and responsible consumption and production, SDG 12, would really have major impact. Really, this change in supply chain will have a major impact on these 3 areas. And in turn, the longer term impact would really be thinking about the really long-term issues of ending poverty, gender equality, reduce inequality, and of course, climate action. So I'd like to just position ourselves as really thinking not just about one aspect, but the full spectrum of the SDG goals. I think it's important, especially the question of addressing income inequality around the world between rich and poor countries, and in terms of societies within countries. And I think there's a real opportunity to do so if we really do the next stage of development of the global supply chains, this fragmentation. That's why I say it's an opportunity.
Thank you so much, 贺老师。
谢谢。
All right, thank you. From long term and mid term, the global supply chain and industrial chain will be subject to great impact, barriers, disruptions, and the shorter chains. But from long term, the global supply chain will be complete. I like to quote Clarence Williams, an economist. In 10 years, U.S., Europe, dependence in China will be more or less the same. And let's move on with Madam Zhai Jingli. Well, for China, we are confident towards China's economy and the resilience of global supply chain resilience. We also need to enhance the green supply chain. We need to improve green design, green process, green products, and green business models so we can contribute to the entire ecosystem. Professor Ni, all right, I will speak about 2 aspects. It's not enough for leading companies to join this force. Well, but 80% of our carbon emission in the global supply chain falls into Scope 3. And all those Scope 3 enterprises are SMEs. They do not have enough capital, talents, capabilities. So how do we leverage innovation to empower those SMEs to allow them to follow the international trend? The second point I want to make is the international standards. A lot of Chinese standard is not recognized by the Europe. I think UNGC has a role to play, so we can have more alignment of these standards. Now, sometimes we can follow the international standards, but one day, 1 kilowatt of batteries will lead to several kilograms of CO2 emission. I hope that these standards in China can be recognized by Europe and by the US. Thank you very much, Professor Ni. Due to time limitation, this is only a start. From dear entrepreneurs, we not only talk about how we should develop, how we should keep optimistic, we should also develop green and sustainable industries.
I hope this can inspire all of you here. Due to limited time, I will conclude here. But I'm also looking forward to seeing you together, joining us all together to conduct further discussion. Thank you. Now, let's take a family photo together.
感谢大家的倾听。
Thank you for your time and listening. Since we released the two products and conducted the two topic discussions, I hereby conclude the parallel forum. Looking forward to seeing you next year. Please take everything with you, and also please return the simultaneous interpreting headset. Thank you so much.